Welcome, ghosts and ghouls, to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast Photography Horror Stories Halloween Special. I will be sharing stories from listeners and others who have contributed via Reddit, Threads, Facebook, and sending their messages in via the contact form on our website. These horrors come in all shapes and sizes. And before we get started, let me warn you, some of these stories will chill you to the bone. And let us begin with a story of my own. I had decided to go out hiking and photographing landscapes and wildlife in the late afternoon on an autumn day. I had hiked several miles through the woods, over and shot both a few rolls of film and a bunch of digital captures. I had managed to get photos of an elusive bald eagle that I'd been trying to get pictures of in this area for years. I noticed the sun was starting to head down towards the horizon, so it was time to turn back and head for my vehicle. I was feeling high with accomplishment. I knew I had some amazing shots. I was about 2/3 of the way back to my car when I stopped. Where was my wallet? I remembered thinking when I got out of my car that I should put it in my camera bag, but I had a premonition that I would accidentally knock my wallet out of the bag, reaching for some camera gear, forgetting that there were pockets that I would not need to open to reach my gear that would easily and safely hold my wallet. How could it have come out of the zippered pocket in my hiking pants, which was now somehow open? I didn't recall opening the pocket. I had been kneeling down to get different angles. Maybe it popped out or was pushed out by my large 150 to 600 millimeter telephoto lens. What should I do? I had to think fast. The sun was sinking rapidly, and soon there wouldn't be light to see on the trails. I turned around, packing my gear into my bag as I walked so as not to waste any time. I did have one secret weapon, though, my dog. Surely she would pick up on my scent on the trail and sniff out my wallet if I was unable to see it. We ran back up along the trails, and it was not easy going as my bag had the aforementioned 150 to 600 meter telephoto lens, a digital body with battery pack, extra batteries, plus 2 film camera bodies and lenses. I searched more and more frantically, finally reaching the spot where we had turned around. We doubled back again as the sun was starting to dip dangerously close to the horizon. It was getting harder and harder to see, and we still had miles to go to get back to the car. I kept scanning the ground, covered in a carpet of red, orange, and yellow leaves, hoping to see my wallet. To no avail. I resigned myself that either someone else had picked it up or it was lost. We reached the car just as the sun went down and it began getting dark. I drove home in silence, thinking about what I would need to do. Cancel my credit cards, order new ones. I'd have to get a new driver's license. My anxious mind was starting to spiral. I pulled into the driveway and began unpacking my gear into the house. As I put away my camera and lenses, I picked up the jacket I had been wearing into the woods that morning when I was scouting locations, and my wallet fell out of the interior pocket. I'm a dumbass. Our next story comes from human_contribution56 on Reddit. I updated the firmware on my camera, and after that, focus mode was switched to AFS. I always keep it locked in AFC, so it never came to mind to look at it. I proceeded to shoot an entire race of mostly blurry, out-of-focus action shots. A quick glance at the LCD, and they looked fine, but once loaded onto the computer, maybe a handful of keepers from probably 1,000 shots. Lesson learned: double check all settings prior to the start. Test shots and zoom in on the LCD to make sure that they're sharp. Truly scary. It's a photography haunted house, but it's just camera lenses that don't fit your camera body. It's a photography haunted house, but it's just the warning message on the back of your camera reading, "Format card to continue." It's a photography haunted house, but it's just the feeling of the breath of an Uncle Bob on your neck while they lean over your shoulder to get the same shot as you. Our next chilling story comes from Minion Herder on Reddit. I climbed a mountain, taking a new set of filters and a few other new bits of gear to try out. Took me about 6 hours to get to the top. I got to the bottom 4 hours later and realized all of my new kit was still at the top in its cases, only used once. Truly frightening. Our next story comes from Shed One and is also about a mountain. Another photographer tried to fight me on a mountaintop about a year ago. I believe he was heavily medicated or drugged. He got going about all kinds of conspiracy theories and how he had a PhD in economics and all of that stuff, and I asked him to take it down a notch, and that sent him into a rage. I quickly packed up my bag and left. Very scary situation. But do you know what else is scary? Not having a good contract to protect you and your clients. Get yourself a contract template from the Nerdy Photographer store and keep yourself safe. We have templates for wedding photography, event photography, portraits, even contracts and agreements for second shooters and associate photographers. Just visit nerdyphotographer.com and go to our store for our selection of contract templates. There's nothing to be afraid of when you have a Nerdy Photographer contract template. Yes, our next terrifying tale comes from NY Fashion Photog on Reddit. I generally thrive on improvisation and adapting to conditions. I brought a model to rural locations about 2 hours outside of New York City. I was planning on bringing lights out into this house in the woods. I had battery-powered Pro Photo strobes, stands, softbox. Just no case of cameras and lenses. I had left that at home. Hard to shake that one off. And another story, a wedding shoot horror story from fan Leanne Cotton Photography, submitted on Threads. At the rehearsal dinner, I'd had issues with my camera the day of, and the kind gentleman at the camera shop reset it to the factory settings. So that meant I shot the entire rehearsal in JPEG. At the ceremony, I shot inside the church in silent mode during the ceremony. It made for a great time dealing with banding issues, which is apparently a very common thing in mirrorless cameras. For those who aren't aware, silent mode banding is a common issue that occurs in mirrorless cameras when the shutter speed doesn't match the refresh rate of artificial lights. This results in stripes or lines in the image. Again, at the ceremony, I had borrowed a Tamron 70 to 200 millimeter lens for the day. When I went to use it, an error code appeared and it wouldn't function. So I shot the wedding with my 85 millimeter and 24 to 70. I found out later you have to turn off the VR on the lens in order for it to have worked on my camera. And the cherry on top was leaving my spare battery in the charger, locked in the church. Surprisingly, I survived and the images turned out well, and the couple was happy. Quite the learning experience for me, though. Yes, indeed. It's a photography haunted house, but it's just clients who keep emailing you every 5 minutes to tell you edits they'd like to done to the photos. It's a photography haunted house, but it's just a bunch of influencers claiming to be photographers. It's a photography haunted house, but it's just male photographers telling successful female photographers that they're doing it wrong. Both aggravating and terrifying. Our next story comes from Another Day, Another Dollar. For my photos, I hike a long distance and pitch an open tent for the morning light. I'm based in New Zealand, so our forests don't have anything dangerous that can hurt you, besides a couple of species of spiders. On one such hike, in an unconserved land, I pitched a hammock in between a few trees. As it got darker, I tried to fall asleep. Around midnight, I heard a growl next to me that sounded like a panther. There have been cases of mysterious wild panther spottings in New Zealand over the years, which are still not proven. I thought perhaps I had come across one. I grabbed my head torch and turned the lights on in the pitch black. Suddenly, I see 40 pairs of eyes looking at me from the darkness. One pair of eyes were just on top of my sleeping bag, on the tree, by my feet. Turns out they were a bunch of possums. Throughout the night, possums growled and fought each other as I tried to sleep and kept waking up to their nightmarish sounds every hour. Our next horror story comes from Mighty River 952, a fitting moniker for what we are about to hear. I was out shooting some shoreline sunset at low tide, happily snapping away. Then I turned my head and realized the tide had flipped. Water had cut my route to land off, and I was stranded on this little mound that will soon be underwater. The desperate one-handed doggy paddle back to land, holding my camera in one hand above my head, above the water, was not fun. Honestly, folks, that is a true nightmare scenario for me. Another horrifying story comes to us from Dex Hamster. I was taking photos in a sort of rural industrial area north of my town, and when I took an exit off of the freeway, I saw this smashed-up sedan on the side of the road. I'm talking open trunk, windshield and various windows broken, debris scattered all over. So I pull off to see if I should call someone, because it looked recent, and also take pictures because the stars are out, and I thought this abandoned car would make for a good photo. Not 2 minutes go by after my tripod is set up and a vehicle pulls off the highway and slows down in front of me, turning on a huge off-road light bar. See, at first, I thought it had to be the police or someone thinking I was an accomplice or a part of an accident. Well, they weren't saying anything. They just sat in the road blaring these lights at me while I packed up and uneasily walked down the road in the opposite direction of him and my car, only realizing he turned to follow me, slowly, so slowly. After a few hundred feet of walking, I realize this situation is probably not going to resolve itself, so I do a 180 to confront him, or at least try to get back to my car. As I made a pass on the left of the vehicle, which turned out to be a white van, he just sped off onto the freeway. I promptly got in my car and drove off too. I still have no idea what that was about. This is why we should have people with us, folks, when we go out photographing at night. I believe that there is safety in numbers. Our next story literally makes me want to crap my pants. It is from Mr. Jeff 18. I was in the Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado. I was on the road that goes down into the canyon, and I saw a bear cub dart across the road. I saw where the cub went, and I got out my 100 to 400 millimeter lens so I could take a shot and keep my distance from Mama Bear wherever she was. I got out of my truck and checked along where the cub went. I only walked a few feet from the safety of my truck, and after a couple of minutes I decided that he got away, and I turned around to leave. On the other side of the road was Mama Bear, sitting there, with two cubs playing behind her. I froze for a moment because she was only 15 feet away from me on the other side of the road. I decided not to push my luck. So I got a few photos and got back in my truck, and she walked off into the woods. Well, Mr. Jeff, I'm glad you survived that encounter because, honestly, I probably wouldn't have even taken the photos because I would have been afraid of aggravating Mama Bear, and she would have run across the road and had me for lunch. You know, that's a frightening situation. You know what else you can do to scare a photographer? When you get back from a shoot and realize you have hundreds or even thousands of images to sort through. That's why I use Aftershoot. Aftershoot is an AI culling and editing service that can save you from having to go through all of those images. And now you can save 20% on any Aftershoot plan when you use the link in the episode notes and enter the discount code CTF20 at checkout. That's discount code CTF20. What are you waiting for? Save yourself from culling today. Our next story comes from ZomGBs. I was midway through hiking Routeburn, a 2 to 3 day hike in alpine terrain in Fiordland, New Zealand. A lot of New Zealand stories, which only sees a reduction in intense rainfall when it's snowing instead. It had been on-off raining all day, so I stowed my camera in a small dry bag and clipped it so it was hanging to my sternum strap of my hiking pack. At some point, I had stopped raining for about 20 to 30 minutes and looked to be consistent, so I wanted to take off my rain jacket. This required I take off my bag first. Hot, sweaty, and uncomfortable, I sought to remove my pack in order to remove the rain jacket. Click. I undid my sternum strap. Foomp. My stowed camera with $4,000 worth of bodies and lenses plummeted from chest high to a rocky path. Sharp and merciless rocks, pebbles and stones formed of sharp marbles. Time slowed, and I watched it fall. But my hands slowed too, and I could not catch it nor place my foot out to break the fall. Down it went, 32 feet per second, for what felt like a minute. It landed. I stood there trembling, and I didn't dare pick it up. I had no idea what I'd find and how many pieces I'd find it in. I couldn't escape my fate any more than my camera could, and I stooped down and pulled my camera up for a post-mortem inspection. The camera had fallen almost 1.5 meters unabated to what should have been its grave, but the X2 silica packs I had in my bag, because of the fear of the wet and humidity I was going through for 3 days, happened to be at the bottom of the dry bag. When the camera fell, it landed rear screen first, lens up, on those 2 silica gel packs. They broke the camera's fall at the cost of their own life. The bottom one was punctured through, and the top one had a big dent from the body landing on it, almost breaking too. But the camera and lens were unharmed. A miracle. One of the scariest moments of my life. The silica packs are not really usable anymore, as they expel silica dust from being pierced and crushed. I have replaced them, but I kept those silica packs. They have a place of honor among my belongings. In the Valhalla of my stuff. Fitting place for them, for saving your gear. Our final submitted story comes to us from Rudran Nagy, a former guest on the show, through our Facebook community group. Here's my horror story. First time going to the south of India, and the moment I exit Hyderabad airport, I really hope I pronounced that correctly, folks. I'm not sure. The moment I exited Hyderabad airport, I almost got robbed and killed by a fake taxi service. I was stopped by airport security just in time before I almost sat in the cab and the driver was arrested. My very first thought that came to my mind was, thank God my camera is safe. And on the fashion shoot of the day on the Mumbai beach, light just became right for what I was looking for. I started taking photos and enjoying my first beach shoot in the early morning while looking at the sunrise. And then I started hearing helicopters flying. But I didn't think much of it. Minutes later, I saw police officers approaching me and asking, what am I doing? I got arrested for shooting on a beach which was under the control jurisdiction of the Indian Navy. They confiscated my camera and told me no longer to touch it, as it was evidence now. After 45 minutes, I was allowed to leave and given permission to shoot again, but by that time, the good light was gone. However, It still turned out to be one of my best shoots. I was happy and alive. Very frightening. I'd like to finish off with another story of my own, though it's not entirely photography related. While on our honeymoon, I took many, many photos in Scotland, and my wife, Caroline, and I went on a ghost tour of Edinburgh. The tour first took us through the vaults under the city where hundreds, if not thousands of people died between 1785 and 1860 from disease, starvation, fire, and crime, including, perhaps, from two very famous serial killers who sold dead bodies for medical examination, though there's no definitive evidence that they did that in the vaults. But they definitely did it in Edinburgh. The overall vibe in the vaults was very creepy. You got the sense that someone was watching you from the shadows. We were skeptical at times since this was a tour and scaring tourists helps generate more clients, right? However, there had been numerous documented cases of people being attacked by spirits in the vaults, deep scratches appearing on their arms and backs after touring the underground and the Greyfriars Kirkyard, or Greyfriars Cemetery, our stop after the vaults. Greyfriars is where J.K. Rowling stole names from headstones for her Harry Potter series of books. M. McGonagall, Tom Riddle, real people whose names she took from the cemetery. There are many stories of hauntings in the graveyard, but the most famous is one poltergeist that has been said to harm explorers late at night, including scratching them, pushing them, and in some cases, breaking their bones. It is alleged to be the spirit of George Mackenzie, a ruthless persecutor of the 17th century Presbyterian movement. When we entered Mackenzie's tomb at the end of the tour, Caroline and I gravitated toward the back of the group so that we could keep an eye on everything and make sure there was no one behind us. As the tour guide spoke, we heard the sound of breathing behind us. The air grew colder. There was the sound of fingernails scratching against the stones. Not the hurried scratchings of some rodent, but the long dragging of nails against stone. The tour guide reached the end of her speech and, aha! Another member of the tour company jumped into the tomb from the open doorway, scaring everyone and releasing the tension. But there had been no one behind Caroline and I. Whose breath had I felt on my neck? I'm glad you listened to these Halloween horror stories. If you enjoyed these, please stay tuned for our Halloween bonus episode, where I will be reading the eldritch horror story, The Sorcerer's Jewel. It's a horror story about photography. And while you're here, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. You can also follow us on social media at The Nerdy Photo. That's at The Nerdy Photo on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, and Reddit. Until next time, everyone, stay safe, stay spooky, and stay nerdy.